After a big opening round in the 2022 NFL Draft, the Jets added 4 more players over the final 2 days. Today we talk about all of the talent the Jets added this weekend on the Locked On Jets podcast.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, this is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com, and it's Monday, May 2nd, 2022. Thank you so much for making this show your first listen or your first watch every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. If you like what you see or hear, hit that subscribe button, and you'll never miss an episode. And if you're watching on YouTube, please give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps the channel out, and it helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Well, when we left off on Friday, the Jets added 3 new players. The Jets had 3 first-round picks. They picked Sauce Gardner 4th overall. They picked Garrett Wilson 10th overall. And then they traded up to 26th to pick Florida State's Jermaine Johnson. But the Jets were active on day 2 and day 3 of the NFL Draft. And today we're going to talk about the rest of the 2022 draft class. A draft class that is receiving near universal acclaim from draft pundits, from the experts in the media. Almost everybody loves what the Jets did, and I'm with them. I think that the Jets have added a lot of talent over the 3 days of the 2022 NFL Draft. Now, the Jets entered day 2 with only 1 second-round pick. Originally, they had picks 35 and 38. They traded 35 to move up for Jermaine Johnson. And I have to tell you, I was looking at this, and the Jets had pick 146 in the 5th round. That was their last pick of the draft, entering Friday night. And I'm sitting there saying, you know what? If the Jets trade this pick 146, if they move up here, that means that we're going to be done by like 1 o'clock on Saturday. And selfishly, I was kind of hoping for that because I got to tell you, when you do this, there are 2 days that just drag on and on and on. One is cut down day, because you always hope the Jets are going to finish their cuts early, but it always drags late into the afternoon. You usually don't find out the final cuts until after the deadline. And the second day that really drags on is the Saturday of the NFL Draft. So with the Jets only having 1 5th-round pick, no 6th, no 7th, if they trade up and they trade that 5th-round pick, we're done in early round 4. I can enjoy my Saturday afternoon. It'll be great. And that's just what the Jets did. The Jets traded up for Breece Hall. They moved up from 38 to 36 to get the Iowa State running back. Now, if you are a longtime listener of this show, you might know 2 things about me. Number 1, I am the self-proclaimed king of being against trading up in the draft. And the second is, I am the self-proclaimed king of being against drafting running backs early. So, if you know those 2 things about me, you might be sitting there thinking, John's not going to be happy that the Jets traded for Breece Hall. Well, you'd be wrong, though. Most running backs are not really game-changing players. And if you've listened to this show before the NFL Draft, you know that I was a big fan of Breece Hall. Breece Hall is an exception. Breece Hall is one of the few backs I wanted to take early in the draft. In fact, Breece Hall is one of the few backs I'd be okay with trading up for, because most of the time, like, a trade-up is kind of self-defeating. It's really based on speculation. You don't know, you're guessing the player's not going to fall to you, but I bet you there are many cases where a team trades up, and if they had just been patient, the player would have fallen to them. I mean, Mike McCagnon did this a couple times, where he would trade up 1 pick to get a play. He did that for Bryce Petty back in 2015. He did that for Chuma Edoga in his last draft in 2019. It just seems so self-defeating. Now, the Jets traded 146, which meant my day was over at 1 o'clock on Saturday, which was great. But it was not really that big of a deal. I like the Jermaine Johnson trade, as things kind of went down on Friday night. I'm happy they got Jermaine Johnson. I do have a few mixed feelings about it, though, because depending on how things go, you could see the case where maybe 35 and 69 are more valuable than what the Jets got at Jermaine Johnson. We'll see how it goes. I'm not saying I was against that trade up, but I could see it either way. This one, I mean, you're giving up 146 to move up for Breece Hall. It's not that big of a deal. And I think the Jets got an excellent back in Breece Hall. And again, I'm the king of don't trade up. I'm the king of don't draft a running back early. So if your Royal Highness is telling you this is okay, I think you should be okay with it. But it goes beyond the player. This goes into building around Zach Wilson, because all offseason I felt like the Jets really needed to upgrade the talent level around Zach Wilson. And the way to do it was to get an established number one type receiver, a guy with a proven track record, 1,000-yard type receiver, a veteran guy you could plug right in there. And as we all know, that did not happen. So as we entered the draft, I started thinking this through, and you got to have a plan B. And that's one of the issues Jets general managers have had through the years, is that when plan A didn't work, they did not really have a plan B they could turn to. And we know I think Joe Douglas actually agreed with me, because he made efforts to get veteran receivers. We know for a fact he made a big offer for Tyreek Hill a few weeks back. There are reports that he made a very aggressive offer for Deebo Samuel, who did not get traded this weekend to San Francisco. So Joe Douglas wanted a veteran receiver, it certainly seems. And then the Jets were linked with other veteran receivers to various degrees this offseason. There were rumors. But at the end of the day, the Jets were not able to get a veteran receiver, which means there has to be a plan B. And to me, the plan B was, first of all, you draft somebody at 10 who has a refined skill set, a guy who runs routes well, like a Garrett Wilson. That was the guy I was looking at. Now, Garrett Wilson could be very good. Listen, I would love it if Garrett Wilson came in and was like a 1,100-yard receiver right out of the gate. I don't know if he's going to be that. That's a lot to ask out of a rookie. So you're probably only getting like part of the way there. He's probably not going to give you everything an established veteran receiver would give you, which means you're going to have to make it up somewhere else. And to me, that somewhere else is you improve the run game. And how do you improve the run game? You take a Breece Hall. I'm going to call him Bryce Hall at some point, I know. I mean, the Jets have Bryce Huff, they have Bryce Hall, now they have Breece Hall. In addition to, Zach Wilson and Garrett Wilson, Quinnen Williams and Quincy Williams. I mean, the Jets have so many guys with similar names. So I apologize if I call him Bryce Hall at some point. I'll try not to. But in Breece Hall, you got a guy who you can build a running game around, I think, and he's going to be good. We're not going to have to watch Ty Johnson flail in the passing game anymore. Breece Hall's a good receiver out of the backfield. To me, he's going to be the lead back. And that means Michael Carter becomes kind of like your second back, your change of pace guy, your guy who takes Breece Hall's place when he needs rest. And in your number two back, you have a guy who has legit number one back skill. So you have depth as well. You hope nothing ever happens to Breece Hall, but if it does, if Breece Hall can't go for a game or two, Breece Hall can't go for a longer stretch, you have a guy you can trust in Michael Carter. Both guys are quality receivers out of the backfield. These are guys who are going to help Zach Wilson out because they're going to keep him out of those bad downs and distances that produce mistakes, that put everything on his plate. As you're bringing along Zach Wilson, who on his own is going to need to make some big steps. I mean, there's only so much the Jets can do for him, but the Jets had to upgrade this talent base around him. And if they were not able to get a number one type receiver, if they were not able to get that big time target, then the second best thing they could do is get Garrett Wilson, who is, to the extent there is a plug-and-play guy, and I'm always a little hesitant to declare somebody a plug-and-play guy, but to the extent there is a plug-and-play receiver in this draft, it's probably Garrett Wilson, and then Breece Hall. And running back is a position where I feel more confident than other spots that you have a guy who can stick right in the lineup, because it's not so based... I mean, there are nuances to the position, but on some level, when you got the ball in your hands, you can either make it happen or you can't. And that's not going to change tremendously through your careers the way, a release off the line of scrimmage is at the wide receiver position, or, learning how to run certain routes. I mean, running backs are usually most valuable on their rookie contracts. And Breece Hall is going to step right in there. I think this is a great pick. And the other reason I don't mind moving up is, as I mentioned this earlier, lots of trade-ups are based on speculation. You're guessing. And a lot of times these guesses are off. We have pretty solid information that Breece Hall was not falling to the Jets. Pretty much everybody knew Houston wanted Breece Hall. So the Jets had to jump Houston, and they only gave up a 5th round pick. And all joking aside, I know I've been joking a lot about how my Saturday was clear. That was great. 5th round picks. Listen, if you're asking me, would you rather have a 5th round pick or not have a 5th round pick? Of course I'd rather have a 5th round pick. It's a lottery ticket. Sometimes there's an outlier player who falls to the 5th round who ends up being really good. But the expected value of that pick's just not very high. And the cost of trading up for Breece Hall in this situation when you're only giving up a 5, it's not really that big. It's honestly, to get Breece Hall, to me it's well worth it. It's not really that. I don't see the objection to that deal because they really gave up nothing. And there's a certain irony in the Jermaine Johnson trade as well, because I was talking about that a little bit earlier. If the Jets are sitting there at 35, if the Jets do not trade for Jermaine Johnson, you wonder, does Houston move up? Because Houston was there at 37, and the Texans were probably sitting there thinking like, well, we're going to get Breece Hall because the Jets can't get him before us. And the Jets were kind of able to sneak attack Houston. Whereas if the Jets were sitting at 35 ahead of Houston, maybe that incentivizes the Texans to move up for him. So maybe the Jermaine Johnson trade helped the Jets get Breece Hall. But in my mind, an excellent pick. This was, and I have to say, I did not think Joe Douglas would do it. I've talked about it on episodes of Locked On Jets in the weeks leading up to the draft. I said I would love Breece Hall. This is the rare exception where I am good drafting a running back early. First of all, because of the player, because I think he's just a perfect fit for what the Jets needed, good fit for the system, good receiving threat, which you want in the Jets system, and a good complement to Michael Carter. I think Breece Hall brings things to the table that Michael Carter really does not. So I think you got guys who fit really well. I just did not think Joe Douglas was going to do it. I really didn't think Joe would value a running back as highly, and I guess Joe kind of saw things the same way I did, where I don't think Joe Douglas is going to draft a running back early. I don't think this is going to be a regular thing where he's going to constantly be drafting running backs early. But I think maybe it was just a case where he saw the fit. He saw this as an exceptional talent, and he saw this as the type of player who can really help Zach Wilson out. So I was completely delighted. All joking aside about my Saturday afternoon being clear, I was absolutely delighted by the Jets picking Breece Hall. There are not going to be many situations where the Jets are trading up for a running back in the second round that are going to have me happy, but this was one of the exceptions. But of course, the Jets were not done. They still had 3 picks after that. They had a 3rd-round pick and a pair of 4th-round picks. And I'll give you my thoughts on those picks ahead here on this Monday episode of Locked On Jets as we recap the 2022 NFL Draft. The NFL Draft is over, but there's plenty of sports action out there. The Stanley Cup playoffs are beginning this week. We also have the NBA playoffs along with baseball's regular season. And you should know that BetOnline.net is your #1 source for all of your betting stats and sports info. Find all of the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs to esports and more. And you can even bet on NFL. They have bets on the upcoming season. If you like what the Jets did, you can put some money down and make it when the Jets succeed in 2022. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. Bet online, where the game starts. Thank you again for making Locked On Jets your first listen or your first watch every day. We are free and available on all platforms, and today we are recapping the 2022 NFL Draft, rounds 2 through 7, although the Jets were only active rounds 2 through 4 because of various trades that have been made over the last 2 years. After the second round, moving up for Breece Hall, the Jets had 3 picks left. They had pick 101, which was a late 3rd rounder that they got from Tennessee as part of the Jermaine Johnson trade. They had pick 111 in the 4th round and pick 117 in the 4th round, one of them from Carolina for Sam Darnold, the other from Minnesota for Chris Herndon. The Jets' own 4th round pick actually went to Seattle. That was something the Jets gave back in the Jamal Adams trade a couple of years ago. And I kind of viewed these 3 picks as like one group, because over the offseason, I've been like really exploring the value of draft picks to try and figure out like what the odds are, what you can expect at a given pick. And like late 3rd, early 4th round pick, the odds of hitting on these picks is not very high, but it's not 0. And I've looked at like 25 years of data, and what I would guesstimate is that in that range, you probably got like a 1 in 5 shot out of finding a decent role player. So, any given year on that pick, you're probably going to miss. If you're doing your job right, you'll probably, every couple of years, you'll hit on a late 3rd round, early 4th round pick. That's what a good drafting team would do. But when you got 3 of them, you got a real shot at hitting. And for me, like, the objective here is find one good role player out of these 3 picks. Because again, when you're this late in the draft, your odds of hitting are not that high. But when you have 3 swings of the bat, you got a real shot. So the Jets drafted 3 players. They drafted Jeremy Ruckert at 101, a tight end out of Ohio State. They drafted Max Mitchell, a tackle out of Louisiana. And they drafted at 111, and they drafted Michael Clemons at 117, a defensive end out of Texas A&M. And to me, success is one of the 3 things happening. Jeremy Ruckert becoming a quality second tight end, Max Mitchell becoming a quality backup swing tackle, or Michael Clemons becoming a quality situational pass rusher. And listen, if more happens than that, if you get more than that, if 2 of these guys turn into good role players, one of these guys turns into more than a role player, one of these guys turns into a good starter, you're delighted. But for me, that's like the threshold for success. That's like beating the house in the casino. So let's go through these picks. Jeremy Ruckert was a guy who was been linked to the Jets since the Senior Bowl. The Jets, there was lots of buzz that the Jets loved him in the Senior Bowl coming out of Ohio State. And, sometimes what you see at the tight end position in the NFL is a guy is not really utilized in the passing game because the team has so much talent at the receiver position. That happened with a guy in Buffalo, Dawson Knox, who had A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf in Mississippi. Another guy who comes to mind, this is not a good example because Jeremy Ruckert's not going to be as good as George Kittle, but George Kittle was a guy at Iowa who wasn't really used because of it wasn't so much the receiver talent, but because of Iowa's offense. But the point is, sometimes a guy doesn't really produce a ton in the receiving game in college at the tight end position, and they could be a better receiver in the NFL. And Jeremy Ruckert is that kind of guy who could, I'm not saying he will be, but he conceivably could be, because you look at all the talent Ohio State has had over the last couple of years, whether you're talking Olave, whether you're talking guy the Jets drafted, Garrett Wilson. I mean, Ohio State's receiving group was so good that Jameson Williams couldn't even get on the field for them. Jameson Williams had to transfer to Alabama because he had a better shot at getting on the field at Alabama than he did at Ohio State. So a tight end like Jeremy Ruckert really was not used that much in the receiving game. And as I watched Ruckert, I watched him after, I really did a deep dive on him after I heard buzz, this was a few months back after the Senior Bowl, that the Jets really loved him. And I was kind of impressed. I thought he was a better route runner than I was expecting. Now, he did not run a full route tree, and again, he wasn't utilized all that much, but better route runner than I was expecting. Ridiculous catch rating. I mean, he catches, he can really expand the strike zone for a quarterback. If a quarterback's off target, Jeremy Ruckert can go get the football. And as a blocker, I actually think he's a little overrated right now as a blocker, so let me explain what I mean by that. I'm not saying he will be a bad blocker in the NFL. I think sometimes he's a little out of control as a blocker. I think sometimes the hand placement needs some work. I think his game needs a little bit of refinement in that sense. But the thing that's good about Ruckert is he's a willing blocker. And that, for me, that's the biggest thing. Because there are not a lot of tight ends who are ready to be contributors as blockers on day one. The question for me is, do you put effort in? Do you like blocking? Jeremy Ruckert likes blocking. He likes being physical. Now, I don't think he has game-breaking speed. I don't think he's going to run away from a lot of guys in the NFL, but the skill set's there, the tools are there for him to develop into a quality tight end. And I think this spot, late third round, that's a perfect spot for the Jets to take a tight end this year, because they've added the two guys in free agency. They added Uzomah and Conklin in free agency. So this is the year you draft somebody who needs a little bit of work. I think Jeremy Ruckert is a little bit more of a developmental player than a lot of other people do. A lot of people are expecting day one. I don't see him as a day one player, in part because he's going to be number 3 on the depth chart. So unless somebody gets hurt, which you hope nobody gets hurt, Ruckert's probably spending this year developing. I view him as a guy the Jets drafted. Maybe 2 years from now, he takes over for Uzomah, turns into a quality player. I think a very logical pick for the Jets at 101. Now, the 4th round came, and the Jets had 2 early 4th round picks. Then they took Max Mitchell, a tackle out of Louisiana. Now, this was interesting because, as we know, Joe Douglas, big on measurables, really likes guys who do well at the combine. Max Mitchell had a horrible combine. I mean, pretty much every drill, he was at the bottom 20% of offensive line prospects. In fact, a lot of them, he was in the bottom 10% of offensive line prospects. And I'm talking historically. I'm not talking this year. He had a horrendous combine. So this was interesting because I was looking at this and I was kind of curious. And then I saw something that was very interesting. Max Mitchell weighed in at the Senior Bowl at 299. He weighed in at the combine at 307. And I wonder whether maybe he got it into his head that there was concern, because one of the concerns I've heard about this player is that maybe he's a little too light to play offensive line in the NFL, and I wonder whether he put that weight on and it kind of slowed him down. Because you see the reverse at the combine sometimes. Sometimes some guy will come out of nowhere and dominate the combine drills. You'll be like, how did he do that? And he'll be 10 pounds lighter than you're expecting. And I wonder whether, and Max Mitchell can bulk up. I mean, he's got the frame to put on extra weight. But putting on 8 pounds that quickly between the Senior Bowl and the combine, that might be, he might have done it in a way that kind of slowed him down a little bit, that hurt his combine drills in a way that, doesn't really reflect his athleticism, because he's known as a really nimble guy. And, stylistically, he actually makes a lot of sense for the Jets, because the Jets obviously have a wide zone run game where your tackles have to be athletic because the ball's, on a wide zone play, the ball's being run to the outside, which means your tackle has to be able to get there. In the Jets system, I don't want to say strength is secondary to athleticism because strength's still really important, but you got to have tackles who are mobile in this type of offense. So a guy who I think fits the scheme, a guy who was a very good player in college, guy who was really rock solid. Now at a small school, not playing the best competition, and a guy who probably will need to bulk up in the NFL, and he has the frame to add weight and have it not hurt his athleticism the way maybe it did at the combine. He'll need to work on. I think there are a few things he'll need to work on. I think his hand placement. There's some technical things, but a guy who moves very well. I think who is athletic enough to play the tackle position. And again, I want to emphasize here, this is not a guy who I think was drafted to replace Mekhi Becton because when even early day 3, we're not drafting guys who are immediately going to step in. We're drafting developmental guys you're hoping, but you're not really expecting anything from. This is not even a replacement for George Fant. The Jets drafted the tackle round 2. I could say maybe this is a guy you're taking for a year from now. But at the tackle position round 4, you're kind of drafting a developmental guy. And this guy, I think, fits the mold of what the Jets are looking for. Will he develop? I mean, I can't say, but I understand the pick. I think this is probably a guy worth taking a shot on in the early 4th round. Well, there's only one pick left to discuss. I think by all accounts, the Jets had an excellent draft. Unfortunately, I'm going to end the show on a negative note because we have one more player to talk about. It was the last pick the Jets made, so it's not that big of a deal. It's not worth getting upset about. It was definitely my least favorite Jets pick. I'll explain to you why I feel that ahead here on this Monday episode of Locked On Jets. Of course, over the weekend, we had the NFL draft. If there was a protein bar draft, however, we all know who would go number 1. It's Built Bar. The only question is which Built Bar flavor would go number 1 overall because there are so many candidates. They're all so delicious. At Built Bar, they figure out how to make it taste great, and then they figure out how to make it healthy, and somehow they do both. Most bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein, which you can compare to a candy bar, which usually has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. But these bars are all covered in 100% real chocolate. They are absolutely delicious. So go to Built.com right now. You can see all the flavors for yourself. And when you check out, use promo code LOCKED15. Again, that's promo code LOCKED15. It's one word with no space, LOCKED, number 1, number 5, for 15% off at Built, BUILT.com. This is the Locked On Jets podcast. This Monday after the draft, we're breaking down what the Jets did over the weekend. We've talked about Breece Hall. We've talked about Jeremy Ruckert. We've talked about Max Mitchell. There was one last pick. It was Michael Clemons. The Jets drafted the Texas A&M defensive end at 117. Their final pick, they were done at 117. They were done around 1 in the afternoon Eastern time on Saturday. And, it's amazing. It's just like clockwork. Every year, except last year was an exception, but it's like every year in the 3rd or 4th round, the Jets make a pick that I really do not understand. You want to go back to Dexter McDougal in 2014. You had Bryce Petty, 2020. I mean, I really didn't understand any of the picks the Jets made. Ashton Davis, Zuniga, Michael Pirine, James Morgan. Go back to 2019, Trevon Wesco. And this was the one that fit the mold. And we can laugh about it because, look, the Jets got 4 of the top 40 players in this draft by most accounts. So it's not really that big of a... It's the 7th guy they're picking. It's the last guy. But this was the one pick I really did not like. It's the one pick I really did not understand from this draft class. Clemons is a guy who he's already 24. He's going to be 25 this year. And he did not produce at all until he was 24 years old in college. So this is kind of like, if you ever watch a preseason game in the second half, you frequently will see some guy who's been in the NFL 5 years absolutely dominate, even though the guy's not that good of a player. It's just because he's more physically developed. His game's more refined because he's been in the NFL for 5 years. He's playing against undrafted rookies. It's kind of the same concept when you have a 24-year-old dominating college. I mean, he was good last year, but he was so much older than the guys he was playing against, and he had no track record of success before then. And beyond that, it's like if his athletic testing was better, I could say, okay, there are some projectable skills here, but his athletic testing was pretty pedestrian. So I don't know. I feel like this is one maybe the Jets overthought a little bit. And listen, maybe I'm wrong. I've been wrong on picks before, but this was the one I really didn't get. I think the first 4 picks, you got 4 guys who all conceivably could be starters. with the next two, you have guys who are more developmental guys, but guys who I can see maybe developing into quality role players, if not outright starters. I'm not saying it will happen, but it could happen. This was the one I really did not get. I was really kind of puzzled by this one. I thought, there's not really a great track record of production, and there's not really a lot of projectable tools in Michael Clemons. So, again, I don't want to go crazy here. It's when you have this many picks that are promising in front of it, it's not that big of a deal. And again, what do I know? I've been wrong about these things before, but this was the one I just don't see. I just don't see it. But that was all for the Jets. And that leaves their draft class, a 7-player draft class. Usually you have a 7-player draft class, but you have one pick in each round. The Jets had 3 in the first round. They had 1 in the second, early second, 1 in the third, and then 2 in the fourth. So even though the Jets only made 7 picks, the value of these picks was much higher than your typical draft class. And by all accounts, everybody's saying the Jets had a great draft. Let's hope they're right, but lots of excitement in the fan base, understandably so. And you have to really search. You have to send out a search party to find somebody who doesn't love what the Jets did in this draft. Hopefully it all works out the way we're expecting it to, but I think it looks like the Jets improved themselves quite a bit this week, and lots to be excited about after a very long, rough stretch for Jets fans. Maybe we're finally turning the corner here, and we're going to talk about that plenty in the days and weeks ahead, because there's so much more to break down about this draft. But that's all for today. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We have a new episode each day for you, Monday for Friday. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. If you like what you see, hit that subscribe button. Give the show a 5-star review if you're listening on a podcast source, and a big thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. Have a great Monday, everybody. I'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.